Among the Democratic presidential hopefuls preparing for the Iowa caucuses just 33 days away. Some candidates putting the cap on successful fourth quarter fundraising.
Senator Bernie Sanders says his campaign received more than 5 million individual contributions. The Booker campaign says they beat their year-end goal of $800,000. More money means more resources, more ads, more staff, more door knocks, more yard signs that hopefully turn into votes on Election Day.
The DNC has 6 more primary debates scheduled between now and April. The convention is in July.
Fox's Allison Barber. Andrew Yang says his campaign expects it raised more than $12.5 million in the fourth quarter, and Mayor Pete Buttigieg's campaign says it raised nearly $25 million. It's notable that Mayor Pete is no longer the top official for South Bend, Indiana. On Wednesday, the city swore in its new mayor. Meantime, President Trump prepares to get into the campaign mode when he returns from his holiday, and he'll hit the ground running.
The president has already booked his first campaign rally of the new year. On January 14th, the president will travel to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to address supporters just 2 blocks from where Democrats will hold their national convention in July.
Fox's John Decker. Former New York Yankees great Don Larson dies. In 1956, he became the only player ever to pitch a perfect game in World Series history. Larson died Wednesday at age 90. And Wall Street reopens on Thursday after the New Year's break as the bull market charges into 2020. America's listening to Fox News.
Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with a true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine. A bistro look that feels like home. Their menu features local and traditional flavors with a twist. From their famous Calaguan Hapa to fresh ahi poke salad and their award-winning barbecue ribs. Mescla takes your favorite local dishes and serves them with extra flair that you'll only find at Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Stop by their newest location in the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. For reservations, call 969-2652. Mescla, a true taste of Guam.
Yikes, are those Christmas bills coming in already? Those high-interest credit cards at 16, 18, even 24%? Well, we have a New Year's solution for you. A Bank Pacific personal loan with rates as low as 4.65% to pay off those expensive credit cards. It's easy, it's fast, and it's as low as 4.65% APR.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal credit opportunity lender as low as 4.65%. Conditions apply.
Iranian-backed militiamen withdrew from the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad on Wednesday after 2 days of clashes with American security forces. But U.S.-Iran tensions remain high and could spill over into further violence. On another front, U.S.-North Korea nuclear talks are stalled, and that's frustrating the North's leader, Kim Jong-un.
North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un is threatening to unveil a new strategic weapon.
He likes me, I like him, we get along. He's representing his country, I'm representing my country. We have to do what we have to do.
Kim says his country is no longer constrained by his agreement with the president to halt nuclear and ballistic missile tests. The U.S. tried unsuccessfully for a year and a half to get North Korea to dismantle its weapons. Kim now promises to move even further away from a deal.
Fox's Rich Edson. New information may be introduced when the impeachment trial starts in the Senate.
The House Intelligence Committee is bracing for a new document dump from one of Rudy Giuliani's associates, Lev Parnas. The Justice Department gave Parnas's legal team a New Year's Eve surprise when it shared evidence it had seized from his home. Parnas has now asked a judge permission to hand all of it over to Congress. His attorney says these iPhone records and personal documents, quote, corroborate the strength of Mr. Parnas's potential testimony in the impeachment inquiry. The specter of this and other potential new evidence prompting Republican Susan Collins to caution her Senate colleagues not to count their chickens just yet. All evidence, however, remains moot until Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Majority Leader Mitch McConnell agree on whether the pending Senate trial includes witnesses.
And that is Fox's Ellison Barber, or Jillian Turner. A factory catches fire in New Delhi, India, injuring several people, including some fire officials. This is Fox News.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's pulmonology clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's pulmonology clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
It's hard to believe, but Security Title is 20 years old. Reaching this milestone is a clear testament to the hard work of our employees, who are as passionate about our work as we are about our community. We are most grateful for the realtors, lenders, attorneys, investors, and the buyers and sellers we serve. They are the reason our doors have been open for 20 years. Security Title looks back with gratitude for the past 20 years and looks forward with optimism to the next 20. Thank you, Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yeah. So I'm kind of serious about that, as you can tell. One of the 10 parts of the Bill of Rights, one of the freedoms that we enjoy here under the American flag, one of which we are all charged with securing, protecting, and making the maximum use of. So here we are, Tall Tales. For the first time, I haven't done this since last year. I haven't seen you since last year, Real Joe Cruz. But the years have been kind to you. You don't look a bit different now than you looked in 2019.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Clean living and a clear conscience, no doubt, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the Second Amendment is something, of course, that is very important here in Tall Tales. And I'm always on the lookout for news bits that will show us what the Second Amendment is, who's trying to take it away from us, what arguments they're using, and how we can counter those arguments. Well, the latest comes from a place called White Settlement, Texas. You just know from the name of the town, this has got to be the worst place on earth. White Settlement, Texas. Wow. And there was a shooting at White Settlement, Texas, and 2 people were killed, but had it not been for the good guy with the gun, it could have been a whole lot worse. Well, one of the things that those who favor the Second Amendment advance is that if the government complies with the Second Amendment, there will be lots of occasions where people who are allowed to arm themselves, to protect themselves, are the good guy with the gun. And because the good guy with the gun was there, the carnage caused by the bad guy is severely limited. The Second Amendment buffs, yourself and myself included, will advance this theory. The left hates it. They just hate it. Because the left has the ability to blame the crimes not on the lunatics that commit them, like in Texas, but on the gun itself. So that's kind of like saying, you know, man, I had a lot of cavities the last time I went to the dentist. My doggone toothbrush. Yeah, I'm going to sue the manufacturer of my toothbrush because I had so many cavities. Not a closely fitting analogy, but it'll do for now. So here's the scoop from Texas. Jack Wilson is a hero, but why were so many other parishioners armed? And how did the shooter get his gun, given his criminal history? This is a story that ran in, guess where? USA Today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is a story that I got from, I guess when they're not busy writing editorials for the Pacific Daily News. They occasionally do a news story. And this is a story that ran in USA Today, and the headlines, "Armed, even in church." Texas shooting is about a lot more than Jack Wilson's heroism. Jack Wilson is a hero, but why were so many other parishioners armed? And how did the shooter get his gun, given his criminal history? So here's the story. Jack Wilson is a hero, all right. It took him only 6 seconds to kill a gunman at a Texas church, saving countless lives. Unfortunately, that kind of split-second heroism has been turned into a PR tool by gun advocates. This is the USA Today now. The reality of Wilson's heroism is a lot more complex. He wasn't just an ordinary parishioner, as gun advocates may want you to believe. The church's volunteer security team member is a firearms instructor, gun range owner, and former reserve deputy for the local sheriff's department, according to a New York Times detailed account. I talk about birds of a feather sticking together. I saw it in USA Today, and I know it was true. You know how it was true? Because they cited to an article in New York Times, so it's got to be true. In other words, he's exactly the kind of man you run around with a firearm. But we know nothing about at least 6 other parishioners who also appeared to draw their handguns at West Freeway Church of Christ in White Settlement, Texas. Talk about all the planets. 6 people in church with guns at the West Freeway Church in White Settlement, of all places.
There was probably more of them that didn't draw, but they had weapons on them.
Yeah. Well, at White Freeway Church in Church of Christ in White Settlement, and then Texas. Where else? You know what Texas is like, right? So there is a phenomenon, a descriptive phenomenon known as sour grapes. And then there's another one known as sweet lemons. Yeah, sour grapes means, yeah, I didn't get the prize, and I should have got the prize because I was a lot better than the other guy. That's sour grapes. Here's sweet lemons. No, I didn't get the prize, and I'm kind of glad, too, because first prize was an all-expense-paid trip to New York, and I wanted to watch I Love Lucy on TV, so I'm kind of glad I didn't win the prize. Sweet lemons. So I'll let you decide whether this is sour grapes or sweet lemons, right? But we do know what happened in White Settlement, Texas. And then here's a big, bold subheadline. The real story here isn't heroism. Of course, that wouldn't... going back to the parrot, we know nothing about at least 6 other parishioners who also appeared to draw their handguns at the church. And that's terrifying. Of course, that wouldn't matter to the churchgoers of that community of roughly 18,000 residents, right? What matters is that Wilson saved them with a single shot, and other gun-wielding parishioners were ready just in case Wilson failed. But we really reached a point when each of us need to carry have we really reached a point where each of us need to carry a firearm anywhere we go? Gun advocates certainly think so. They point to Wilson and the new Texas law that allows him and others to carry firearms inside the church. President Donald Trump said as much on Twitter. Oh boy, they're really piling on now. First it's a man with a gun, then it's 6 other people with guns in White Settlement, Texas, and now Donald Trump tweeted as much. Well, let me see who's going to... Maybe I'll get some help here from another Joe. Then I'll finish this up. Can you help me out here, another Joe?
Uncle Bob, you don't need any help. You're a one-man working machine, also monologue. But honestly, the issue, if I was to summarize it, and in words that before Bill Cosby got in trouble, is pretend I'm 4 years old and try to explain it to me. Less government. The Republicans, I'm not sure it's the same as conservatives, but the idea is, in terms of government, less is more, because on average, whatever the government seems to get tied up in, it usually messes up in a big way. And then it throws countless millions and billions at the same problem to try to fix the mess, and half the time it's just creating more mess. So the theme is, with the Republicans and conservatives, less government is more, and the less that the government and Uncle Sam interferes in my life, the better. Hence, states' rights. We tend to shift in favor of states' rights, because then we only have to really mostly deal with our fellow Americans within our jurisdiction, and we can try to convince them to a fair balance, so to speak. But what do you think so far? Does it sound pretty much on track there, Uncle Bob?
I'd say you're right. And of course, another thing that the left hates about this good guy with a gun is the left's solution to every problem. Well, we'll start a government agency, and we'll develop a program, and we'll spend hundreds of millions of dollars on it. It probably won't work, but everyone will see that we're really trying hard. But if people are able to...
we really care. We care. That's why we're spending more and more. And but really, it's really like shooting ourselves in the foot or leg, because it comes back to bite us in the butt in the form of debt.
I like your phrase there. Doing that is really just shooting ourselves in the foot. But of course, the left is going to say, we would never shoot ourselves in the foot, because
unless it gets them votes.
No, we ain't got no guns. Remember, we're the left.
Oh, good point. Good point. Very good point. But really, Uncle Bob, it's an issue of the American dream, the white picket fence. We can live in peace as long as I'm on my side of my fence and you're on your side of your fence, and you don't jump my fence and try to hurt me, and I don't jump your fence and try to hurt you. And just in case someone doesn't follow or abide by that understanding, we have the Second Amendment right to bear arms to defend ourselves. And because you can put in a term where it might not be so politically correct or nice, but when the West was being opened up to other fellow Americans, we were up against varying tribes, nations, so to speak, who didn't like the westward movement and the railroad and everything. And so there was very, very often armed conflict, and which is why they brought in the cavalry. And we're having to work peace treaties and put some of the tribes and reservations to prevent these attacks on westward moving Americans in order to expand the size of America. So in those terms, you would ask, you wonder what would liberals say in terms of people being able to defend themselves. You had something similar to a westward movement where the military is not going to be there for everyone. Are they going to go and take the people's ability to defend themselves away, or is it so far out of our memory because it's history that it's not going to recur. It's already history, and so therefore, now that we've conquered the West and we've dealt with the conflicts of Native Americans, we don't need guns anymore. And you have to ask yourself, is that true? Because the situation is, the landscape still there. If we forget our history, it's been said we might be due to revisit some of our history or repeat it in form of and fill in the blank conflicts within these rural areas. But anyway, I've taken a lot of your time there, Uncle Bob. But thanks for letting me.
I only have one comment on your stream of consciousness there, another Joe, and that is, you mentioned the analogy of the white picket fence and each person staying on his own side of the fence.
Yeah.
And, well, the left won't stand for this for two reasons. First of all, if the left would pass a law saying you cannot paint a fence white because that's discriminatory, right? It sends the wrong message. And then second, if the left would make you put an opening in the middle of the fence, just like they don't want any fences along the borders or anything like that.
Exactly, precisely the point. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd have, if you build a fence, if you put a fence around your yard, you would have to build several openings so that people, poor people, could come in and help themselves to your property. Okay,
Uncle Bob, Happy New Year, and I'll keep listening.
Okay, thanks a lot, another Joe. So then poor people could come in and help yourself to your property, and unless you're Chief Ignacio, there wouldn't be anything you could do about it. If you're Chief Ignacio, you could call Central Precinct and say, could you have people come up and do routine patrol checks around that hole in my fence? Right, right, R. Carl?
Yeah, that's right, Bob.
I get it right once in a while, the law of average.
I just wanted to call in and add in something that I think complements what you're saying. I had show up on my Facebook news feed a story from The Pluralist, and the title is Anti-Gun Priest Suggests He'd Rather Let His Parishioners Die Than Allow Guns in Church. I'll read the first part of it. Father Jeremy Zippel, Associate Pastor of St. Martin de Porres Catholic Church in Belize City and a former Executive Director of America Magazine, reacted on Twitter to the deadly shooting at Wednesday Free, and on and on. And here on Twitter, he says, Jeremy Zippel says, this Friday we'll bury a 16-year-old girl gunned down across the street from our church. 3 years ago, our pastor was held at gunpoint in churchyard, but will not permit guns in our church. Some Christians got to be bold and say no more killing, and we trust God enough to take care of the rest. And another comment, and some will say that's imprudent and foolish, and I'll say, but where are the fools for Christ, and who said the gospel was supposed to be easy? So, I don't know, it's that deep of commitment, even sacrificing your parishioners when crazy people come in armed with guns, I don't know, it strikes me as very irrational.
Well, most of the folks listening out there are too young to remember this, but older folks who can remember a little bit about World War II remember that one of the very popular songs in World War II had this phrase in it: praise the Lord, but pass the ammunition, and we'll all go free. Yeah. And I think it's as true now as it was then, but it shows you the power of the left and how it's able to corrupt any institution that it comes in contact with, Carl.
Yeah, one irony I find is that government policies were responsible for a large portion of the destabilizing of society. And I've given before the example of, from the 40s to the 60s, Black American families were over 70% two-parent families. And starting in the 60s, I think the mid-60s, President Johnson instituted the Great Society and the expansion of the welfare state. And what they did is they unintentionally incentivized women to have as many children as possible to capture as much public assistance as possible. And they also incentivized fathers to abandon their families because families without fathers get more public assistance.
And so families with fathers don't get any.
Yeah, exactly. But, that created millions upon millions of white and black and Hispanic and Asian families without fathers, no positive role models. So their role models became sometimes the gangs, their family became the gangs, their role models became the gang leaders, and so that is to me responsible for a large part of the social problems we see today. And now black American families today are over 70% single-parent family, usually a single mother. So it's just ironic that government, says how they're going to solve all this stuff when in fact their solutions in the past have been disastrous in many cases. So anyway, Bob, thank you for allowing me to chime in. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome, Carl. Stay tuned. We have another almost, an hour and a half of exciting, educational, interesting tall tales ahead of us.
I'll be listening as I drive around. Thank you.
All right. So, so back, so we've had another Joe and our Carl already, starting off the new year correctly here, calling in and agreeing with the host of Tall Tales. So, I'm going to go back to this USA Today article. We know we know nothing about at least 6 other parishioners who also appeared to draw their handguns at West Freeway Church of Christ in White Settlement, Texas. Of course, that wouldn't matter to the churchgoers of that community of roughly 18,000 residents, right? What matters is that Wilson saved them with a single shot, and other gun-wielding parishioners were ready just in case Wilson failed. But have we really reached a point when each of us need to carry a firearm anywhere we go? Gun advocates certainly think so. They point to Wilson and the new Texas law that allows them and others to carry firearms inside the church. President Donald Trump said as much on Twitter Monday. Texas is one of the nation's least restrictive gun laws. Well, Texas, what do you expect? Including allowing armed security at houses of worship and allowing parishioners to bring their weapons to church. Gun advocates didn't waste any time after the recent church incident to promote the idea of arming oneself. The Second Amendment gives Americans the right to bear arms. That isn't, let's see. And that isn't going anywhere. But that constitutional amendment doesn't spell out the types of firearms Americans should bear, nor does it give Americans the right to sell them to anyone to carry anywhere. So this has a lot to do with what happened in the church, right? The gunman at West Freeway Church of Christ, 43-year-old Keith Thomas Kinnunen, apparently had a long criminal history, including aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Authorities say they're still investigating the motive of Sunday's shooting, and there were no immediate details about how he got the firearm he used at the church. We know firearms are readily available to anyone who wants one, really. And that's part of the problem. Sunday's shooting isn't just about Jack Wilson's heroism. It's about how Kinnunen got a hold of a weapon in the first place, given his criminal record. So, yeah, it's true. This guy, Jack Wilson, probably saved 6 or 7 people's lives because he was prepared, as were 6 other parishioners. But we are, this is the USA Today talking. We're the left, so we'll find something to bitch about here somewhere. So we don't know how the gunman got his gun, but we'll still write a story about it. We'll still write an op-ed piece about it and criticize the whole situation, because if we had our way, there wouldn't be any guns in the church, except the gun that Mr. Kinnunen had that he used to kill 2 people. This is classic. This is classic left approach to public safety and a lot of other things.
a balanced lifestyle. Take Care Insurance offers proven wellness and fitness programs to encourage individuals and families to live a healthy, balanced lifestyle through preventative care, being active, eating right, relaxing and unwinding, and being socially connected. They have the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs for all ages. Join the movement. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram or visit takecareasia.com to learn more.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spittin' truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
So, here we are, back again, Tall Tales, first day of 2020. So, all of you out there in our international radio listening audience, you've picked a great way to start the new year. And I've got a caller on the line here. It's Louie. Louie, I haven't talked with you since last year.
Yeah, that's right, Bob. You know, it occurs to me that the most important line in that article that you just read is the one that referred to the question of whether or not it's gotten to the point where we need to carry a firearm in a church. The most important word in that sentence is need. You know, an element of the discussion on right to carry that is often lost is the issue that is implied by that type of question. The implication is, well, if you cannot show a need, therefore the law that allows you to do it is no longer a right that you have. And this brings up two fundamentally important questions to the discussion. Number one, the implication of the question is that somebody else determines whether or not the need exists, not you. Someone independent from the situation will determine whether or not there's a need, such that the individual who might perceive there's a need loses the right to make that decision. And the scary thing about that then is the second point, and that is that if society or someone other than the individual determines whether or not there's a need, even if the law says it's legal, by implication, the idea is you lose that legal right to carry because someone else, society, hasn't demonstrated that you have a need to do so. And that's a very scary implication for the implied practical implications of the laws under which we live.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Louie. So, you know, using an analogy, we have some wonder drugs, like once upon a time, penicillin was a wonder drug, right? So following that logic, we wouldn't expect our doctors to have penicillin until we could show that we needed penicillin, right? Because,
right.
Because if you don't need it, then why bother with it? And that's clearly the left's approach to what I would call individual rights and freedom. Freedom of speech. There's no sense protecting. There's no sense protecting speech, freedom of speech, unless you can show that someone wants to take it away from you. So it's the it's the state, of course, that would be the arbiter of these things, just like with gun rights.
The scary thing about that is the determination has been made. My understanding is that in Texas, it's legal for those 7 people, maybe more, who have carried. And so the issue of whether or not there is a need is kind of an askance, mute discussion. Let the people decide whether or not there's a need, given that the law clearly allows them to do so.
And I think it's also clear that the folks at White Settlement Church, or the church in White Settlement, Texas, really needed to have somebody there with a gun that day, right?
Yeah. And, you know, there's a scary secondary implication. When the article brings up the point, we know nothing about these people, let's be honest, the implication is they might be bad people that shouldn't be carrying. Well, I'm going to look at the facts. The facts are simple. The people that were carrying in that church were churchgoers.
One more reason for the left to distrust them, right? They're Christians.
Well, okay, yeah, it's scary where this possibly goes. It's interesting that we had law-abiding citizens doing a law-abiding thing, and we're still going to raise a question about their decision to use a particular law to possibly protect themselves.
Yes, sir. Well, right on point, Louis, as usual. Thanks a lot for calling.
Take care, Bob. Happy New Year to you.
Same to you. So that's the USA Today take on what happened in Texas. The story, for once, has a reasonably happy ending. The left likes it better, of course, would have liked it better had there not been that good guy with the gun there, because then they would be able to say, we've got to have more gun control. We've got to be able to take guns away from people. We've got to have these red flag laws and all these other things. I have read a piece from Dennis Prager here on gun violence. Goes all the way back to June. And in the face of this article, I think it's time that I read it again. It goes like this. Remember, it goes back to June. This past weekend, Americans learned of another mass shooting, this time by an employee who decided to murder as many people of the people he had worked with for years as possible. As of this writing, the murder toll is 12 people. Every American asks why. What was the killer's motive? When we read there is, quote, no motive, we are frustrated. Human beings want to make sense of life, especially evil. Liberals in this regard, views are essentially the same as leftists, are virtually united in ascribing these shootings to guns. It's kind of like my analogy, you blame a decaying tooth on a toothbrush, right? Liberals in this regard are virtually united in ascribing these shootings to guns. Just this past weekend, in a speech in Brazil, former President Barack Obama told an audience, quote, our gun laws in the United States don't make much sense. Anybody can buy any weapon, anytime, without much, if any, regulation. They, the ever popular they, can buy guns over the internet. They can buy machine guns. That the former president fabricated a series of falsehoods about the United States and maligned on foreign soil the country that twice elected him president speaks to his character and to the character of the American news media that have been completely silent about these falsehoods. In other words, what Obama said is wrong. You can't buy a machine gun. There are regulations as far as buying guns. You cannot buy a gun over the internet. But nobody in the mainstream media called him on it because, well, you know, he's Barack Obama. The main point here is that, like other liberals and leftists, when Obama addresses the subject of mass shootings in Brazil, he had been talking about the children murdered at Sandy Hook Elementary in 2012. He talks about guns. Yet America had plenty of guns when its mass murder rate was much lower. A PhD in criminology and director of research and evaluation at the Minnesota Department of Corrections gathered data going back 100 years in his 2007 book, Mass Murder in the United States, A History. The book reveals in the 20th century, every decade before the 1970s had fewer than 10 mass public shootings. In the 1950s, for example, there was one mass shooting, and then a steep rise began. In the 1960s, there were 6 mass shootings. In the 1970s, the number rose to 13. In the 1980s, the number increased 2.5 times to 32, and it rose again in the 1990s to 42. For this century, the New York Times reported in 2014 that according to the FBI, mass shootings have risen drastically in the past half dozen years. Given the same ubiquity of guns, wouldn't the most productive question be, what, if anything, has changed since the 1960s and 70s? Of course it would. A great deal has changed. America is much more ethnically diverse and much less religious. Boys have far fewer role models in their lives. Fewer men marry, and normal boy behavior is largely held in contempt by their feminist teachers, principals, and therapists. Do any or all of these factors matter more than the availability of guns? Let's briefly investigate each factor. Regarding ethnic diversity, the countries that not only have the fewest mass murders, but the lowest homicide rates as well, are the least ethnically diverse, such as Japan and nearly all European countries. So too, the American states that have homicide rates as low as Western European countries are the least ethnically and racially diverse. The lowest four are New Hampshire, North Dakota, Maine, and Idaho. Now, America, being the most ethnically and racially diverse country in the world, could still have low homicide rates if, and I'm going to stop here for a second. Here's what Dennis Prager's saying. And if you're looking for places that have the low homicide rates and the low mass shooting rates, look to those places where there is the least amount of ethnic diversity. Now, of course, this is heresy. And I'm surprised that somebody from the FCC isn't right behind me with a staff, with a big hook on the end, just jerking me off the air. Because in order to speak on the radio nowadays, you must repeat this mantra. Our strength is our diversity. Our strength is our diversity. Our strength is our diversity. Now, no one, to my satisfaction, has ever explained why, the various kinds of diversity, ethnic, religious, etc., we have in our country is diverse. I could probably come up with a couple of reasons on my own. But nowadays, it's the mantra. It's kind of the blessing of the table before you sit down to eat. You're supposed to say, our strength is our diversity. But this article is saying something else, that Japan and European countries have the lowest homicide rates and the fewest mass murders. And the four of the U.S. states, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Maine, and Idaho, have the lowest homicide rates and mass shootings. So what's going on here? Is someone putting out some false propaganda? Is Dennis Prager just trying to fool us? Is he saying something that's not true? When we all know that our strength is our diversity? Well, here's what he says. America, being the most ethnically and racially diverse country in the world, could still have low homicide rates if, one, Americans were Americanized, but the left has hyphenated, balkanized, if you will, Americans. B, black males grew up without fathers, as you were. The second reason, most black males grew up with fathers. Regarding religiosity, the left welcomes, indeed seeks, the end of Christianity in America. Though not Islam, whose robustness had fathers. And you know why the left really likes Islam? Although it goes against almost everything the feminists stand for, the reason the left likes Islam is because it's not Christianity. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So, I guess it was about a month ago, I mentioned the statement that somebody on our side said that just drove the left nuts. And that statement was, Mohammed and the Muslims are right about women. Yeah, and in the Muslim world, you know, in Saudi Arabia, women aren't allowed to drive cars. They can't own property. They can't, you know, they're supposed to wander around in burqas, etc. Women are far inferior to men as a matter of standard Islamic practice. So this conservative comes along and says, you know, maybe Muhammad and the Muslims, maybe they were right about women. So that really puts them in a bind, you know, because they got to stick up for Muslims. They got to stick up for Muhammad. But then on the other hand, you know, you understand what I'm saying here. Regarding religiosity, the left welcomes, indeed seeks the end of Christianity. Why don't we ask a simple question? What percentage of American murderers attend church each week? Now, that would be a pretty valuable statistic, especially in white settlement Texas. Regarding boys' need for fathers, in 2008, then Senator Obama told an audience, children who grow up with a father without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. Yet the Times has published columns and studies showing how relatively unimportant fathers are, and more educated believe this dangerous nonsense. Then there is marriage. Nearly all men who murder are single, and their number is increasing. So let me see here. You opened the Jimmy line already? All right, I'm going to take a short break here from this Prager piece, and I'll give Jimmy a couple of minutes here. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, I'm sorry to bother you, but you're talking about diversity.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, the Philippines has a big problem with diversity. They said, you know, the problem with the Philippines, you don't have any Jews. And the Philippines said, oh, yeah, we got lots of Jews in the Philippines. We got orange Jews, pineapple Jews, all kinds of Jews.
Yeah, okay, Jimmy.
Not good?
Yeah, thank you very much. Sic transit gemibus, right? Okay. Nearly all men who murder are single, and their number is increasing. Finally, since 1960s, we have been living in a culture of grievance, whereas in the past, people generally understood that life is hard or they have to work on themselves to improve their lives. For a half century, the left has drummed into Americans' minds the belief that their difficulties are caused by American society, in particular, sexism, racism, and patriarchy. And the more aggrieved people are, the more dulled their consciences. When you don't ask the intelligent questions, you cannot come up with intelligent answers. So then, with regard to murder in America, until Americans stop allowing the left to ask the questions, we will have no intelligent answers. That's from Dennis Prager. I agree 100%. I've been peeking at Facebook here for a second, and let's see here. Peter J. Santos. That's ludicrous to say that welfare incentivized birth and single parenting. It's ludicrous. It's not just wrong or incorrect, it's ludicrous to say that welfare incentivized birth and single parenting. Carl, it's a fine conspiracy theory, but super flawed. You know, I like conspiracy theories, and I'm not above speculating on conspiracy theories myself. But this is not a conspiracy theory. Not even close. And to quote Barack Obama, In 2008, Senator Obama told an audience children who grow up with a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of schools, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. Well, let's take a short break here, heading up for the big halftime show.
Chili's 2 for $25 is back. Start with an appetizer to share. Then choose 2 entrees like our mouth-watering Old Timer with cheeseburger or the Cajun chicken pasta, grilled chicken with penne and Alfredo sauce, and chili spices. Feeling extra? Upgrade to a personal fajita or our famous half-rack ribs. Bring a friend or a date to Chili's and get 2 entrees for $25. Located on the 2nd floor of Tumon Sands Plaza. Chili's. More life happens here.
Go green, go hybrid, go to Nanbo Insurance, and your next power bill is on us. Insure your hybrid car at Nanbo and get up to $350 towards your next power bill. That's instant savings for keeping our island clean and green. Nanbo has been providing Guam with over 50 years of reliable and affordable auto insurance. At Nanbo, it pays to go green. Terms and conditions apply. Visit nanbo.com or call 477-9754 for details.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So, let me go to Facebook here. We got some Facebookers commenting on the Prager article. Let's see here. Peter Santos, that's ludicrous. Isn't there a rapper named Ludacris?
Yes, there is, sir.
Yeah, it's not one of my favorites, but I have heard such a thing. Yeah. That's ludicrous to say welfare incentivized birth and single parenting. Carl, it's a fine conspiracy theory, but super flawed. Brad Hewitt, if it's a conspiracy, it's awfully convenient to say that it's an everyday truth. All you need to do is open your eyes and look around. Peter J. Santos, Brad Hewitt, you need to do more than look around. You need to look at the research. You only look and see what you want to see. It takes more than biased assumptions. Brad Hewitt, I just looked around. Let's see. How do I get down there? I have looked at research. I also look around. Both verify my notion. And then Gus Chisangas. I have to say, if we have the rights as such Second Amendment, that we tomorrow should have the right to vote for president. Just saying, Bob. So tomorrow should have the right to vote for president. Let me see here. Let me get my copy of the Constitution out here. See how that would work. I'm going to go to Article 2 of the United States Constitution. Second paragraph of Section 1, Article 2, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled to in the Congress. Okay, the electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for 2 persons, of whom one at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves, et cetera, et cetera. That's this part that goes to how we choose people for the Electoral College. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled. Now, let me see if I could draft the Gus Chisangas amendment here. each state and let's see, how would I do this? Each state and the various, not as easy as I thought it was going to be. Each state shall appoint in such number as the legislature there may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled, and in addition shall appoint an elector for for the Chamorros who live in that particular state. So if there are Chamorros living in California, then California would appoint one elector for the Chamorros, and Washington and so on. So if there are Chamorros living in all 50 states, that would be 50 electors. That's a pretty sizable block of voters. But now that wouldn't work, because then you'd still have to live in a state, wouldn't you? So I'd have to reword it like this. Each state and the island of Guam shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators, etc., provided that the provided that the people of Guam, provided that only the people of Guam may vote, only the Chamorros may vote for the elector from the people of Guam. I guess that would be how we'd have to do it. I've stumbled through this. As creative as I am when it comes to drafting statutes, this is kind of a tough one for me. Each state in the territory of Guam shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled to in the Congress, provided, however, that the territory of Guam may appoint one elector to be chosen by the Chamorros of Guam. That would do it for you, I guess. Yes? You said, I have to say, if we have the right, such as the Second Amendment, then we Chamorros have the right to vote for president. Well, maybe I'll write that up, Gus, and maybe you could get Michael San Nicolas to introduce that in Congress. It's going to be kind of an uphill fight, because, you know, when the Constitution was drafted and the whole governmental system was set up, it didn't contemplate people living in territories voting for president. And yes, there were territories at that time. The United States had territories before it had a constitution. The Northwest Territories, current states of Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and a little bit of Minnesota, constituted the Northwest Territory, which is in place before we had a constitution. And those guys didn't get to vote for president. So it is something that we talk a lot about, because we aren't able to vote to select an elector in the Electoral College, because we don't have congressmen. But the way the system is set up, it's kind of like saying, you know, I've got this really nice 2010 Ford, and I'd really like to be able to burn diesel fuel in it. I say, well, does it have a diesel engine? No, it's got a standard gasoline engine, but I'd really like to burn diesel fuel in it. Can I do that? Well, no, you can't, because that's not the way the car is built. Pretty simple explanation, and subject, of course, to a lot of contradictions, but best I can do before the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Pompeo won't go. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo cancels his trip to Ukraine and 4 other European countries so he can stay in Washington to monitor rising tensions with Iran and its militia forces in neighboring Iraq.
Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, accused the U.S. of committing crimes by striking Kataib Hezbollah targets on Sunday, killing 25 of the Iranian-backed fighters.
The Iranian government, nation, and I strongly condemn the U.S.'s malicious attacks.
Tuesday night, nearly 100 U.S. Marines arrived to reinforce the embassy. Through midnight, demonstrators set new fires and threw Molotov cocktails before clashes erupted again in the morning. By late afternoon, many of the militia members had begun to withdraw.
Fox's Trey Yingst in Jerusalem. The NBA is remembering former Commissioner David Stern, who died Wednesday. Many consider him the league's greatest leader.
Among Stern's greatest accomplishments in his tenure, expanding the global presence of the NBA, setting up exhibition games and training camps worldwide. Stern also instrumental in the creation of the WNBA and growing his league to 30 franchises across North America. He also got caught up in some difficult times, too, at the helm during 4 different lockouts through his 30-year tenure, eventually stepping down in 2014, the same year he would be inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
Stern suffered a brain hemorrhage on December 12th and underwent emergency surgery. A Louisiana mother and son who were devoted LSU fans and died in a plane crash Saturday will be buried today. They're on Thursday in Lafayette, Louisiana. Gretchen and Michael Vincent were among the 5 people killed as they flew to see the Tigers play in the Peach Bowl. America's listening to Fox News.
Yikes, are those Christmas bills coming in already? Those high-interest credit cards at 16, 18, even 24%? Well, we have a New Year's solution for you. A Bank Pacific personal loan with rates as low as 4.65% to pay off those expensive credit cards. It's easy, it's fast, and it's as low as 4.65% APR.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal credit opportunity lender as low as 4.65%. Conditions apply.
Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with a true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine. A bistro look that feels like home. Their menu features local and traditional flavors with a twist. From their famous Kelaguen Hapa to fresh ahi poke salad and their award-winning barbecue ribs. Mescla takes your favorite local dishes and serves them with extra flair that you'll only find at Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Stop by their newest location in the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. For reservations, call 969-2652. Mescla, a true taste of Guam.
Brush fires consuming Australia's east coast show no sign of slowing down. Sydney Mayor Clover Moore.
We're starting 2020 in a very somber mood. Lives have been lost. Houses have been lost.
And crews discovered 3 more bodies Wednesday, bringing the number killed to 17. Hundreds of animals have also died in the fire, which have destroyed more than 1,000 homes and businesses. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seeking immunity from prosecution in corruption cases.
Netanyahu will ask Parliament to grant him immunity from corruption charges. That could delay his trial until after elections in March. Netanyahu is hoping to win a majority coalition that will shield him from prosecution, essentially turning his election campaign into a referendum on whether he should remain in office or step down to stand trial.
Fox's Aisha Hasni. A new way to administer an old vaccine may be the key to a disease that is a scourge in the third world.
Instead of a needle in the upper arm, what about a needle in a vein? Dr. Robert Cedar of the National Institutes of Health came up with the idea of injecting the tuberculosis vaccine directly into the bloodstream intravenously. The method has only been tested in monkeys thus far, but it dramatically improved its effectiveness over the traditional skin-deep shot. Scientists believe the T cells used to fight off a TB infection can reach the lungs quicker when the vaccine is carried through the bloodstream. The potential issue is the relative difficulty of giving a vaccine intravenously compared with other methods. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
And a Colorado town is conned out of $1 million in a bridge construction scam. The Denver Post reports that the town of Erie fell for the scam and sent the money meant for bridge construction to a fake account. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are. Once again, that wonderful halftime show that we put on every day here on Tall Tales, the marching band, the cheerleaders, the drill team, a barrage of cannon fire at the end. So inspiring. We're going to be doing that for the rest of this year. So make sure you're tuned in at 1700. Better yet, tune in at 1600. You don't want to miss any of the wisdom that is the product here at Tall Tales. So before the break, we were talking, I diverted a little bit from the Second Amendment to pick up Gus Gisongas' question. And Gus Gisongas wanted to know, let's see if I can find his question again. Probably not. He says, I have to say, if we have the rights as such as the Second Amendment, then we Chamorros should have the right to vote. So I attempted to do an amendment, propose an amendment to the United States Constitution that would accommodate Gus. It's kind of hard to do on the fly, but I did it. And I suspect that not anyone is going to pick it up and run with it. And then I use the analogy that, the reason that people that live on the territories, it's not just Chamorros. Gus, I can't vote for president. I only got to vote for president one time in my whole life. That was in 1960, one time.
You voted for Nixon?
Oh, then I blew it and I voted for the Democrat. I voted for John Kennedy. Yeah.
You got him shot, Bob.
Well, not a perfect world. Yeah. But that's the only time I ever got to vote for president. And the reason is because I moved to Guam in 1963. And I've lived here, and people that live in the territories don't get to vote for, well, actually, nobody gets to vote for president. We don't elect our presidents popularly. We have an electoral college, and I just read the section of Article 2 that shows how each state, how electors are apportioned among the states. So Wyoming, it's a little state, 2 senators, 1 representative. Wyoming gets 3 electoral votes. California, a big state, California gets something like 48 electoral votes, something like that. So that's the design of the machine. Now, if we did elect our presidents by popular vote, I suspect that Guam, you know, that in 1950, people in Guam would have started voting for president of the United States, because there isn't anybody, and there isn't any reason for anyone to climb up on a soapbox in the Congress and say, I don't want anybody in Guam to vote for president, especially those Chamorros. So if it were a matter of just the popular will, yeah, no one is going to have a problem with it. But it's just not the way the machine is designed. You know, you learned back in the day when you went to school and you had civics class, you learned that the founders decided what we needed was a system of checks and balances so that no single individual or no group of individuals would have too much power. So the power in our system of government is divided amongst the three branches of the executive branch, three parts of the of the national government, the legislature, the president, and the Supreme Court, and the states. So no single part of the government has absolute power, although the way the country's been going, the left has been trying to arrogate that to itself. So that's the way the system was designed. Now, when you talk in terms of checks and balances, a lot of the younger folks out there in our international radio listening audience won't know what that means because they never had the fun of taking apart an alarm clock like I did when I was a kid. Did you ever do that, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You know, every kid at one time or another gets a chance to take apart an alarm clock or take the back off his watch and see all of the little gears in there. So checks and balances. Balances, the balance in a watch is that part of the watch that goes like this. There's a big spring in there, and there's a lever that goes back and forth, back and forth. And if you were to listen to it in a watch, it sounds like this. Tick, tock, tick, tock. That's the balance. But to keep that balance, you know, from going too far and not coming back, there are gears in the watch. And there watches, every watch, except the electronic ones, have a lot of gears. And a gear is a wheel that has teeth in it. So if you can imagine that, a wheel with teeth in it, and a check is a piece of metal that has an edge on the front. It's like a lever with an edge on the front. And as that wheel with teeth on it rotates, the edge of that lever drops into the teeth, in between the teeth of the wheel, and allows it to advance only one space. That's a check. So when they designed a system that was consisting of checks and balances, that's the model that they use. So, you know, the Congress makes the laws, but the check on that is that the president can veto the laws. And another check on that is that the Supreme Court can declare a law unconstitutional. That's that lever that falls between the teeth there. So that's the way the system was designed. And the system was designed in such a manner that no group of people could take control of the government. So if you look at some of the debates that were held in leading up to the Constitution, there were proposals, well, let's let the Congress choose the president. No, that gives the Congress too much control over the president. So it was finally decided that we would choose the president by having each state choose electors in accordance with its own laws. And those electors would choose the president. So in 1876, the state of Colorado chose, the legislature itself chose the electors. So it was only probably around 1830 that most of the states went to the point where the electors in a particular state were designated in accordance with the popular vote in that state. So after the beginning of political parties during the presidency of Andrew Jackson, each of the parties had its slate of electors. So you got two slates of electors sitting on the bench on election night, and when the votes are counted, one slate goes into the game and the other guys go home and sit around sucking their thumbs. So that's how we choose our president. So nobody gets to vote for the president except 538 electors. They're the only ones that get to vote for president. And that, of course, is not how we tabulate it. We tabulate it by electoral votes, and as you well know, there are times when a person could receive the highest number of electoral votes. You need 270, but not the most popular votes. It happened the last time, and the left just can't get over it, right? So that's how a president is chosen. So how would we fit a territory with 160,000 people into that complicated mechanism? First of all, of course, it would require an amendment to the Constitution. And I suppose that anything is possible, but the chances of anyone even seriously thinking about that, very unlikely. And the second thing I want to explain again, Gus, is when we talk about rights and constitutional rights, the Constitution is composed of negative rights. Let's take the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights doesn't give people a right to do anything. Basically, what it does is stop the government from, prohibits the government from stopping people to do something. The First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. This is a restriction on Congress. The Second Amendment, I've read so many times I don't have to repeat it. It says that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Third Amendment, no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner. The Fourth Amendment is full of prohibitions, as is the Fifth. And the Sixth, in criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy a speedy trial, impartial jury, et cetera, et cetera. Then when we get over here to the Civil War amendments, once again, it's the first time that the word vote or voting comes into the Constitution, because up until the 15th Amendment, you don't find the word vote or voting mentioned in the Constitution. Constitution doesn't tell you who gets to vote. It doesn't say that you have to be a citizen to vote. As an example, Article 1, Section 2, the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states. Not by the citizens, but by the people. So when you get up to the Civil War amendments, the 15th Amendment says, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or infringed by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Once again, it's a negative right. It tells you that the United States or a state can't interfere with your right to vote because of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Now, arguably, a state could pass a law that said anybody over 6 feet can't vote. And I would expect that out of, what was that guy's name? The one that said that Donald Trump intimidated the president of Ukraine? Johnson. Yeah, Senator Hank Johnson. Remember, he criticized Trump for being too tall. Yeah, he's the guy that said the Guam might tip over. Yeah. And then we have the the 19th Amendment. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or infringed by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Now women are, the feminists are proud of running around saying, well, we didn't get to vote until 1920. It's not true. Women could vote in Wyoming in 1890. And this amendment does not give anybody the right to vote. It says it cannot be denied or abridged on account of sex. Once again, it's a negative right. And we go to the 24th Amendment, the right of citizens of the United States to vote in any primary or other election, etc., shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other tax. Once again, a negative right. Southern states had poll taxes at one time, and unless you paid your poll tax, you wouldn't be able to vote. Well, it just so happens that black people quite often weren't able to pay the poll tax after the Civil War. And then there's one more negative right here, and that's the 26th Amendment. The right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age to vote or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of age. So all negative rights. So when you're talking in terms of, well, if we have a right to bear arms, why can't we vote for president? It's not apples and oranges. It's more like oranges and cucumbers. It's just not, it's not a comparison that goes very far. So, Gus, you asked me a simple question. You asked me what time it was, and I told you how to build this elaborate grandfather clock. But the name of the program is Tall Tales, so I kind of have a license to do that on occasion. So we've been through the Second Amendment, and I didn't quite get finished with the Second Amendment, did I? We got as far as maybe our strength is not our diversity. Dennis Prager goes on to say that when you don't ask intelligent questions, you cannot come up with intelligent answers. So then with regard to murder in America, until Americans stop allowing the left to ask the questions, we'll have no intelligent answers. And the thrust of this article is that so long as the left continues to push identity politics, which is part and parcel of the left's major agenda, then to blame gun violence on guns is kind of a dead-end street, because that isn't, according to Prager, that isn't what causes it. And he makes a really good point. We've had guns, ever since. Just go to a cowboy movie, right? Yes, it's always been a nation that's been fascinated with guns. But we didn't have these this outbreak of mass shootings until relatively recently, and it tends to coincide with the advancement of the left by all of the identity politics that we see right now. So you can't necessarily say that correlation and causation are the same thing. You can certainly make that argument, and that's the argument I'm going to make. It used to be when, say back in the 60s, or the 50s or something like that, we used to say that one of the real strengths of the United States is this, that the United States can take someone who's Chinese and turn him into an American. I've known a lot of Americans who were Chinese, but China cannot take an American and turn him into a Chinese. Either you are Chinese or you ain't.
I heard how they do that.
How do they do that?
They take the Chinese guy and they spin him counterclockwise, and he becomes disoriented.
I hadn't thought of that, Real Joe Cruz. Disoriented.
Yeah, no longer Oriental.
Uh-huh. Well, you can see that not everybody can be the producer here on Tall Tales. We do some heavy-duty screening here. And the Real Joe Cruz obviously made the cut with his analysis there of Chinese and Americans and orientations, and very good, Real Joe Cruz. Okay, so I put that aside. Oh, the Jimmy, you forgot to turn off the Jimmy line. All right. Hello, Jimmy.
Hello, Jimmy. Hello, Jimmy.
Hello, Jimmy. Hey, we got 2 Jimmys today.
Oh, you had 3.
3 Jimmys.
Anyway, did you read today's Daily Post?
Of course.
It said that on page 15, it says immigrants with a criminal past may soon have a new way forward to stay in the United States. And then it talks about a Vietnamese refugee who arrived at age 11, agreed to deliver drugs after finding out his father was large. So immigrants with a criminal past may soon have a new way forward to stay in the U.S.
Well, doesn't that warm your heart, Jimmy?
Oh, it does something in my heart, but I wouldn't really call it warming.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, what the article is about is a bill introduced by the House of Representatives. And who's in charge of the House of Representatives right now?
It was introduced by U.S. Representative Karen Bass, Democrat from California.
Mm-hmm. California.
And three other House Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Garcia and Pamelia Jayapal and Anya Presley of Massachusetts. Well, I wouldn't want to live in Illinois or Massachusetts, maybe Washington.
Oh, yeah, Ayanna Presley. You know, Ayanna Presley's famous. She's a member of the Squad. So we know that this bill will have 3 other supporters, AOC and Tlaib and Ilhan Omar will for sure come out and support their fellow Squad member.
It doesn't seem much different than immigrants with a criminal past may soon have a new way forward to stay in the U.S. Or, I think just a caller saying immigrants, or saying our beloved Guamanians with a criminal presence may soon have a way to stay out of jail.
Is that what she said, Jimmy?
I don't know what she said.
Okay.
I just know what she did.
Okay, Jimmy. I got you. Well, that's a good observation, Jimmy. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Hey, did you hear about the latest science discovery?
I got a feeling I'm going to, Jimmy.
Unless you cut me off.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, they discovered that at one time there was free-flowing water on the moon. Of course, now it's just a bunch of ice.
Okay.
And then after the scientists discovered that, you know what Guam did?
I give up.
They set up a lunar exploration commission. They want to go up there and get some of that ice and bring it back to our beloved fellow Guamanians.
Probably figured it'd be cheaper than the ice they buy on the street, huh?
I don't know, but no, they just want to get reelected as a public trial.
Okay, Jimmy. Well, once again, you spread a little wisdom here to the international radio listening audience. Thank you, Jimmy.
Bye.
Yeah, that's our Jimmy. Okay, so let's go from there to Jimmy Ikotny. Well, here we are, Jimmy Ikotny. Today is not, we're starting out a new year here with the Daily News doing the same thing they did with last year's editorial page. And the Daily News, instead of running a local editorial, something like, here's what we could do in 2020, has run a piece by Glenn Harlan Reynolds. Tauta Guamsi ahe. Tauta Kilagune. Glenn Harlan Reynolds, special to USA Today. And he says 3 things we'll be focused on in the 2020. So if you want to read it, go ahead. But I'm not going to spend much time on it. It's the same old thing. Instead of running a local editorial, we'll run something from USA Today. And the Post, which ordinarily runs hard-hitting, edgy editorials, comes up with a softball today. But I suppose, today is the day after a holiday, and it is Christmas and everything. It's probably hard to get cranked up to do something really edgy on the day after New Year's, so I'll give them a pass. But the title is, Let's Start Off the Year by Paying Forward. And it's all about being nice and nice people and be kind to your neighbors and help the homeless and all that kind of stuff that no one would disagree with. But when I read something like this, my question is always, yeah, but how does it help? How does it help a police chief who thinks it's okay to call Central Precinct to come and watch his own house? How does it help a Consolidated Commission on Utilities that repeatedly broke the open government law and now apparently isn't taking any steps to recover the money that was illegally paid out? How does it help when we have a village that hasn't had a mayor since September and nobody in the legislature would get off no one in the legislature would get off their butt? One couldn't, anyhow, and introduce the legislation that would bring about a recall. How does it help any of these things? It doesn't. You could be the nicest person in the world, and you could caution everyone else to be really nice, but it's not going to fix the problem. In order to fix the problem, we're going to have people who will jump in and be seen as not so nice by the people who fall victim to their corrective action. So, very timely call here by Ken LG. Ken LG is one who makes no bones about jumping in there and saying, I ain't going to be nice. I'm going to call them as I see them, and if people screw up, I'm going to let them know. Right, Ken?
Absolutely. That is the role of every citizen, because all these politicians and government officials work for us. We're paying their salaries. We put them in positions of power and authority with our votes. And it's up to us to report on how well they do. And I've been very vocal on this subject for a while. I even sent a petition to the legislature requesting they hold a special session, waive public notice and public hearing, and hear Bill 259 and pass it. Monday, I was informed by the Speaker's office they would have a response for my petition. I still haven't received anything. Here we have a group of senators who, when it comes to enriching themselves, I go back to the Thanksgiving pay raise of 2014, where they waived they waived public notice, they waived the public hearing, they met in secret session, and they gave themselves a massive retroactive pay raise. But when it
You know,
comes to
Ken, I remember that, and as I also remember that our current speaker was a member of the Wampat 10 who benefited from that.
absolutely, if I'm not mistaken, I believe she was the secretary of the legislature at that time, because I seem to recall her signature on the legislation, but I could be wrong. It might have been what's his name? How quick they fade from memory. Respicio. But the point is, when it comes to taking care of themselves, they hesitate not 1 second to call a special session. As I recall, they got notice, based on the stories, they got notice around 10 o'clock that a special session was called for 2, and then 3:33 or 3:35, the vote was sent to Adelup for Ray Tenorio's signature.
And he signed it. He signed it the same day.
Yeah, in 90 minutes, they decided to give themselves a pay raise with a 4-hour notice. Now, why can't the speaker right now call a special session for tomorrow at noon, and at that session, go ahead and hear the bill authorizing the recall vote?
Well, you have a senator from Jonia, Pito Terlahi, a former mayor of Jonia, who, when asked about recall, said that he would have to see what the consensus of the members was. In other words, I have this mental image of Pito Terlahi, when asked the question, sticks his finger in his mouth and wets his finger and holds it up and says, I've got to see which way the wind is blowing before I even answer that question.
Well, I'm surprised. I would have imagined that based on the situation with his son over DOC and everything, he would be doing everything he could to put the public at ease. But instead we have it seems like the majority of senators in lockstep protecting the Jonia mayor. And the way they're protecting him is they're going to slow roll this legislative process. Now we got more bills. And now we have to, send the bills to committee. And then we got to, decide which ones are going to get heard and which ones aren't. Then we got to look at the calendar. And then we got to schedule. Oh, we can't. It's almost primary. It's too late. Well, we'll just go ahead and just let the election take care of it. But that's not what the people of Guam put these senators in. We have a clear...
Talking about too late, Ken, sorry, but I got a break coming up here, but I agree with you 100%.
Okay, well, let's hope we can get the senators to finally decide they work for the public and not for the mayor of Jonia.
Very, very true, Ken. Thanks for calling. Okay, I've got our Carl on the line. We got a short break here, and then back to our Carl.
Want to grow your business? Start a new venture? Or stay ahead of the competition? You can. With Docomo Pacific Smart Business Solutions tailored to your specific needs and ambitions, you can do it all. Partner with a network with best-in-class network coverage, state-of-the-art communication platforms, and a team dedicated to providing you with premium support. Call 688-2677 to start your journey to success today. Docomo Pacific Business, delivering your future today.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
A couple of steps into 2020, and where am I? Really? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, the results of a kind of self-assessment, thinking about goals and getting better, and gratitude.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try their featured special for January. Certified Angus beef pot roast tacos. Fork tender, Chamorro-style beef pot roast, sautéed with onions and doni, stuffed into soft corn tortillas and topped with fresh onions and cilantro. Served with spicy roasted chili salsa for only $16.95. Visit Mescla in Agotna and now in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
So here we are, center field bleachers, Wrigley Field, Chicago. Carl, you've sat in this seat out here. This is the second time you've been to the baseball game today. One would think that you have a season ticket or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, Jimmy and I are in a competition to see who can ride the Ferris wheel the most today.
All right. Well, I think it's a draw right now. So what do you want to tell me, Carl?
We're neck and neck. Yeah, I was driving around and I heard Peter's comments online. You read them out about in calling what I said a conspiracy theory about the effect of the welfare state on families. Specifically, I mean, it's affected people of every ethnicity. Unfortunately, it's a larger proportion of Black American families because of larger participation. But, the Black American families survived very well through slavery, Jim Crow, the KKK, and, and I mentioned from the 40s to the 60s, we were over 70% two-parent family. And I don't believe it's coincidental that starting in the 60s with the incentivizing of certain things like women having as many, many children, and even with different fathers. And we've all seen cases like that, that what they ended up with was many, especially males, with no positive role model. And I'm not specifically saying that welfare state has caused all this damage. I'm saying anything that contributed to the breakdown of the American family has contributed to the social problems we're seeing now. Economist Thomas Sowell, he in one of his books, he cited a study that followed hundreds of high IQ people for decades. These were people above 140 IQ to try to pin down what things or thing most contributed to a person's success in life. And obviously, if they all have over 140 IQ, that's not an influence. That's ruled out already. So what they found out after following these people for decades, they found one influence that contributed to their eventual success or failure, and that was the family. It wasn't poverty, because some of them were poor, some of them were well off, some of them were middle class, and it wasn't any other influences. They ruled out everything else but the family. And the specific example of Thomas Sowell, his parents died when he was very young, and he was sent from, I believe it was South Carolina or North Carolina, to New York to live with relatives, 4 adults. And later on in life, his sister teased him. He had reunited with some of his siblings later in life. She said, "Tommy, I can't remember seeing you barely any time when you were a little kid when some adult wasn't carrying you." And this attention from 4 adults had a massive influence on his development. As a matter of fact, people that are born in a certain order, people who are either firstborn or only children, tend to have higher IQs than people who are born later in the brood. or and the reason why Sol said is because only children. I'm an only child, and I grew up in deep poverty. Only children have much more attention from their parents, and firstborn children receive much more attention than the children that follow. As more children are born, this attention is spread out among more and more kids. So the family is tremendously important, and I believe a lot of what we're seeing nationally and locally is caused by the breakdown of the family through divorce and other forces at work.
Well, things like saying a family can be two guys and a child that they got from a female somewhere, right? That's a family. But Carl, I want to take you back to Peter Santos. He says, in response to what you said, that's ludicrous. You know, when you use a word like ludicrous, you know that he really has something going for him there. That's ludicrous to say welfare incentivized birth and single parenting. Now, my own understanding, and I'm not going to be able to point you to page 47 on somebody's book, but my own analysis from all of the things that I've read is when the Great Society came along and the welfare system was set up so that aid to families with dependent children was a source of money for women who had minor children but did not have a husband or a man living in the house. Well, the family was adversely affected by that, because if a woman had 2 children and a husband living in the house, no aid to the families with dependent children. So, as you describe it, what turned out was that we had welfare mothers with large numbers of children with no man around, no family. Now, Peter J. Santos here, of course, has a strong hand, because he has said that what you said is ludicrous. So I suppose if I had to rule, I'd have to rule in his favor, unless you want to tell me that what he said is ludicrouser.
Well, Bob, I can point to my own life story. I grew up tremendously poor. My mom had some psychological issues. My dad was alcoholic. He came home drunk every night of the year. But my dad gave me a basic structure, and he insisted that I have certain manners. He absolutely insisted that I be courteous to people and say thank you, please, may I.
And that you wouldn't, and that you wouldn't go around telling people that what they said was ludicrous.
Yeah, I guess so.
I guess I'm going to have to give the argument to Peter J. Santos then.
Oh, that could be. He may have a point there.
Yeah.
But despite all the things that I had going against me, especially deep poverty, my dad, an alcoholic, with very few resources, and we lived in these ramshackle houses. We had no car, till I was 18. But that basic structure he gave me was a positive male role model. He would, he very rarely struck me. I can only remember 2 or 3 times when he spanked me. But wow, do I remember those times? And I knew I seriously crossed the line. And the older I get, the more I feel I owe my old man.
Carl, the traditional way of raising children is that you should spank a child every day. You may not know why you're spanking him, but he'll know. Right, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir. I got plenty spankings.
Yeah, your dad may not have known why, but you darn sure knew, right?
Yeah, and he also threw in these eagle eye stares, and he had a booming voice that was terrifying to me, So, 90% of the time, that was enough to tell me, I better get back, straighten up and fly right.
Yeah.
He didn't need to spank me because, his booming voice and his stare, his glare was enough to, really scare me straight,
Yeah. Well, hey, Carl, I got Pete on the line here. So I guess then I'm going to have to give the nod to Peter J. Santos because he said that what you said was ludicrous, and you
Okay,
have.
well, maybe Peter can set me straight. I'll listen in.
Okay, so we're gonna break. We're gonna be heading down the home stretch here in just a second, and it may very well be that Pete can take me all the way to the finish line. So hang on, Pete.
Cocoa Coffee Company is now available at Circle K. Single origin coffee beans carefully sourced and locally roasted to give you the freshest cup of coffee Guam has to offer. Grab a cup that's brewed every 30 minutes or purchase a bag of the locally roasted whole beans. Flavors now serving: light medium roasted Ethiopia and medium dark roasted Jamaican Blue Mountain. Exclusively available at Circle K. With every Cocoa Coffee Company purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go towards the Cocoa Recovery Program.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So, Real Joe Cruz, we have a caller on the line here named Pete.
Yes, sir.
Now, I don't think he does, but if he did, if he had an identical twin, what would his twin's name be?
I'm not sure, sir.
Repeat.
Oh, I see.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Pete.
Hey, good afternoon. I guess I'm being called to repeat my comments.
Yeah.
Well, if you notice, I posted a second comment that said the research actually proves the opposite, that women who stayed on welfare longer tended not to have more kids because, of course, they're going through the hardship of being on welfare. Now, it's not a walk in the park being on welfare, right? And I do believe you spoke earlier about the difference between correlation and causation, and I think that's what the issue is we have cultural shifts, and we had also the sexual revolution going on, and as a result of those kinds of things, we had more single parentage, and the government response was to create the welfare state. I don't think it was the opposite way, because if you look at the research and the data, the fertility rates among women on welfare were actually lower than the general population. And so that's why I said it was ludicrous. It was taking...
Wouldn't inaccurate work just as well, Peter?
Yeah, but, it's more attention getting.
Yeah, it worked this time, didn't it? Yeah.
Like when Tom Cruise objected in A Few Good Men, it's like when his objection was overruled, he said, well, then I strenuously object.
True enough.
Yeah, but what I really wanted to talk about was Bill 181 and all the hoopla about it.
Good.
We're, in essence, well, I heard a comment earlier that, it took Michael St. Nicholas to get this through. That's inaccurate, to use your word. He's pushing a technical fix through that was a screw-up by the previous representative. And then at the end of the day, we're paying ourselves with our own money. So all this hoopla about, why are we paying it with local funds when we're going to get the federal government to pay for it, that's inaccurate too. So whether we pay for it with local funds at first and then use the Section 30 funds that we're going to get anyways, it's a wash. It ends up being a wash. What all the hoopla is just about who wants to take credit. And at the end of the day, we look at it objectively. What is Bill 181 trying to do? Is just trying to speeden up the process, because the reality of the matter is that folks are dying every day. we're at the sunset of their lives.
Do you have any statistics on that, Peter? That people are dying every day?
Well, the speaker said that since I think
that's
in
conclusive.
December, in the month of December, there was I can't remember the exact figure, but it was like about half a dozen of the survivors. And like I said, this is at the sunset of their lives. The mortality rate of people this age is much, because they're so old.
Hey, you're scaring me, Peter. I hope I make
you're
it.
in that age group, aren't you, Uncle
Yeah,
Bob?
I am indeed. I hope I make it through the program. But I have to.
Well, I'm surprised. They say tall people taller than 6'6" have a shorter lifespan, but you seem to be the exception to the rule.
I'm the exception to a lot of things, Peter.
You are exceptional indeed, Uncle Bob.
I agree with you on one thing, and that is that this is really all about who's going to get the credit. Because if San Nicolas's bill does not become law, there aren't any local funds to pay out. Because there would be.
Correct.
So this whole 181 thing is at best smoke and mirrors, and the difficulty that I've had with it.
Well, it's kind of counting the eggs before it hatches, and they're just really believing that all the eggs are going to hatch. Something could come up, and this bill 1365 could take another couple of years.
Exactly, because if the Senate doesn't act on it by the end of this Congress, it's gone, and we got to start all over again.
Right, but eventually we're going to pay for it with our own money. It's going to happen sooner or later. Hopefully sooner. It might be later, but that's I believe that's the spirit of Bill 181 is to try to get money in people's hands before they actually die.
My analysis is that the spirit of 181. I can't decide. I can't decide whether they're grandstanding or showboating. That's my dilemma. Because what they're doing is a futile act. There can be no memorandum of understanding with the Treasury Department on anything unless 1365 passes. And even then, I can't see the Secretary of Treasury sitting down and penning something that says, yeah, you go ahead and we'll reimburse you. I just don't think that's going to happen. But, it's...
Well, at the end of the day, it's all going to come out of Section 30 funds, which we're going to get anyways, whether we use it for paying off the war survivors or not. We're still going to get the same amount of Section 30 money. It's not like the Section 30 money is going to increase. All Bill 1365 was doing was saying, yes, you may pay it out of Section 30 money, which was never really what we wanted in the first place, but it was a 11th hour compromise.
I don't know if it was an 11th hour compromise. I think it was an 11th hour desperation play, kind of a
yes, that's more accurate.
A Hail Mary pass, and we had it. Back McCain agreed with Madeline that we could have it and not have to pay for it out of Section 30 money, and she booted it. She lost it. So she screwed it up twice.
The issue of contention back then was whether or not they could pay survivors of the survivors, the heirs of the survivors.
So Madeline once again proved the old mathematical axiom that 100% of something is not anywhere near as much as 50% of 100% of nothing is not near as much as 50% of something. So she screwed it up twice.
It's too bad, we're in 2020 now, and hindsight is 2020, huh?
Well, I wouldn't even say that it required hindsight at that time. When you're going and petitioning the Congress for something and asking them to spend money, and you offer nothing in return except perhaps the ability to feel to have a warm feeling in your tummy, your bargaining position is not very strong. And
I think the argument was, it was a moral imperative, and there was no return on the funds. It was just, hey, this is the right thing to do. You got to just do it.
Well, anyhow, Peter, it's always a pleasure talking to you. And
all right, Uncle Bob. Keep being exceptional.
I can't be anything else, Peter. Thanks,
all right.
Thanks for recognizing it. Okay, so long.